Nice. Two guitar players in this group today. Love it. Gentlemen,
Hey, Neil.
how's it going, Michael?
Very good, very good. I'll be able to stay a little bit longer than last week this time, so I'm happy about that.
Fantastic. I am also very happy about that.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. My pleasure. I'd like to welcome Will too.
Hello, how's it going?
Hey. Um, I'm also really excited to have Will on this call just to kind of like create some context here because Will is going to do his own book club around another amazing Chandler book starting in January. Is that right, Will?
Yeah, that's the one.
Very cool. So he's kind of like, we had a conversation and he was asking me kind of how I went about facilitating this one. Yeah, which book? Maybe you should let him know, Will.
Crazy good,
Yes.
which I read on Nick's request as part of the apprenticeship. Ah, there was so many like wide eye moments. You know, you're reading, you hit a bit, you're like, oh, that's just taken my map of reality and gone like that. Yes, yeah, nice, Devon. I was just blown away, and actually, I took quite a long break from reading, and then got back into it over this apprenticeship, and I was like, it'd be amazing to get a group of minds digging through something and see what all those different perspectives brings up.
Fantastic. And yeah, that's kind of so Will and I had talked about he was like, so how's the Prosperous Coach Book Club going? Kind of asked me some questions about how I facilitated it, etc. And I was like, it'd be cool if you just come join a call and participate and just kind of get a feel for it real time and then kind of see how that works. And maybe people from this session, these sessions, or the Hummingbird Society in general will come into your book club because it's a great idea. um, cool. Okay, so maybe we might see some more people come on here. There's some kind of regulars that might not be able to attend. Layla, I don't think can attend. I don't know about Kate. I don't know about Ellen. It's also the time changes happen, so that could confuse people. But anyways, uh, also just to give Will a kind of my perspective on this whole thing. Uh, what I find about this book, and this is a spiel that especially Devin knows well, is that I kind of look at this book like multi-dimensional. And I kind of consider each chapter to be its own book. Like, so you don't need to know every chapter in this book or watch a ton of videos from the Prosperous Coach sessions to hopefully mine something out of this book, out of this moment. So, um, and that goes for you too, Michael. You kind of heard the spiel last time, but also Aiden is just if you find something you want to weigh in on, there's no like experts here. There's no hierarchy. This is a round table expression of what's kind of coming to you through this book. So, in my opinion, that's like ultimate prosperity. So, we're just kind of seeing what happens and going with it. So, uh, also to kind of set the scene, we worked on this chapter last week, but it's just like a giant chapter. And it's the first chapter in the fearless coaching part of the book. And I think that's why I quoted that Dune quote at the beginning of the email. It's just because, fear is the mind killer. So obviously, like getting rid of the fear is the mind expander. And then in this situation, that I would say that right out of the gate, he just gives us this giant chapter that's way bigger than any of the chapters that we've kind of encountered up until now. And there's a ton of killer information. So maybe I'm not going to read the whole chapter again, but I am going to read out the key components here to just kick it off. And also just maybe just before I get into this, Michael, Devin, Aiden, Tatiana, did you have did anything spark over the last week that you want to get into, that you feel is connected to these different components?
Well, items 10 and 11, God with a small g in terms of acknowledging the power of the person in front of you. And then the next one is come from spirit, tapping into something deeper, a higher calling, the universe, God even. I thought that was interesting, and he didn't really elaborate much at all on those. So maybe that's something that would be worthwhile for this group.
Cool, man. I love that direction. That's killer. Thanks, Michael. Yeah. So first of all, maybe what I'll do is just read those sections like you're saying, and then if you want to weigh in, just get everybody on the same page, and then just dive into that. So God with a small g. Notice just how powerful the person in front of you is. Put your attention on their power. One advantage of me spending so much of my own life feeling powerless is that I now quickly see how powerful people are. But this is something we can all do. Your client is the god of their world because they create their own world and they don't even know it. So that's pretty powerful. I like that distinction of like God with a small G. That's
It's a big reminder. It's a big reminder that not only our clients, but we are creating our own reality and creating the way that we perceive the world and the stories that we write around what happens to us. I thought that was an important point to acknowledge in the other person. And I don't know how much, I mean, I think you guys have done more coaching than maybe I've done, but I'm wondering how much of that do you express to the client? I mean, how much do you guide them to feeling more creative in their own power, or feeling like they're more empowered in their own world?
I love the question. I can dive into it, but I'd love to hear. We have a couple coaches on this call, and just people in general. Anybody want to weigh in on that?
I'd love to ask a clarifying question. Are you asking how, as coaches, we point people in the direction of their power?
Yeah, that's what I was getting at. Yeah.
I haven't got something prepared, so I'll mute myself again and have a think.
For sure. I would say, for myself, personally, Devin, go for it.
What we just saw there, like the past 30 seconds was a masterclass in this. Thank you, Will. Because what you just did there, even in going, hey, is this what you're asking? Like that as an example of extraordinary coaching, it just wasn't lost on me that like you practiced it right there. Hey, is this what we're talking about here? And in that, the person, you know, in a coaching session is like, I guess that is kind of, yeah, that is where we're going.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, getting that kind of confirmation just adds to making sure we're on the same page. That's a good, I could use that.
Yeah, and oh no, go for it.
Yeah,
Hey, you know what we should do here is that I always love to do this is let's do the hand raising thing, because on Zoom it always just turns into like people talking over each other. So let's just go for that. But let's go with what Will had to say, and then let's just do the hand raising bit.
Exactly. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, thank you, Devin. Because actually, I might have missed that. And it's something I've really been practicing is leaving all assumption and going in empty. It's like I don't know. I know that you're powerful. and that's sort of the only direction I need. And it's really interesting when you listen, you hear what someone's saying, and then so you want to clarify, you want to get really clear, and something can happen in presenting what's been said back to someone that helps them hear it very freshly. And it takes form when it's spoken, because before that it might just be formless, uh, entangled thinking in their mind, and then they speak, and you go, okay, what I'm hearing is this. Is that it? Is that correct me if I'm wrong? And they're like, it's almost like they're hearing it for the first time. There's something refreshed about it, and then you have a direction for conversation.
Hell yeah, Devin.
I 100% admit that I could have been paying more attention to the beginning of that, but I heard something where it was like to empty yourself out before a session, and this idea of like just leaving my stuff in safekeeping. Like it'll be there when I come back, but when I show up for a session, it is entirely focused on them. And what I was pulling up was this beautiful, I made a post about this beautiful conversation I had with this guy who was a speaker and author from Dubai. And we spoke about the different acknowledgements across cultures. And I think it's really relevant to bring in that there's a depth in language across cultures that I think in English we're kind of lacking. And we had this great conversation. We were on a 3-hour flight, talked for 2 of the 3 hours, and we got to this point where it was like, okay, in Namaste in Sanskrit or Hinduism, you know, it's I bow to the small g, divine God inside of you. In Arabic or Islam, peace be upon you, assalamu alaikum. In Hindi, pranam, you know, and in Japanese or in Zen, it's gasho. And in English, we have like sup, good morning, you know, there's not something that I'm aware of, and I'm open for you guys to sharing, but like there isn't a deep acknowledgement that respects with reverence the being in front of you.
Yeah, that's interesting. Hey, that it's more like the closest thing I can say is like I can think of is like let the Lord be with you or something like that. Like it's very much like there's some third power. It's not a will.
What an amazing observation. Sup. It's so fun. All right. How's it going? You're very like, yeah, completely different thing. And my mind there and I'd love to hear thoughts you guys have on this. What's going on there? I'm thinking about, okay, well, a lot of the religions or philosophies you pointed to are based more in the East, and then we've got a very different set of language over in the West. You're right, Neil. What you say, may the Lord be with you. Um, you I don't think outside of a church I have never heard someone say that. So any language we do have in the West that points to something spiritual is part of a religious thing as well. So it isn't just this purely spiritual thing. It's very heavily tied and associated to a religion. Definitely here in England, it's a largely secular society we now have. So people wouldn't understand that language. They'd instantly go, "Oh, that's a religion. I'm not religious." So, you know, what's that down to? You know, and it brings up Nietzsche and God is dead and we have killed him. This idea that I think he had that in the West we have fallen from that, or there's a disconnect from that. Again, the internal small g God inside.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right, especially quoting Nietzsche, because he goes on in that pamphlet to talk about the kind of the pitfalls and warnings of when you kill God, that you kind of unearth or chuck away this whole moral social apparatus that's involved in that, like the community of the church, and then kind of the idea of a personal relationship with God and what that is, and like that we're all God's children, and this like the language of the Christian church, unfortunately, really kind of makes it a third person kind of situation. Unlike the Eastern religions, like you're saying, like there's still this idea that we all have that spirit inside of us, but it's talked about in third person language. It's not talked about in, like you're saying, in these Eastern religions, where it very much is like there's something in you that is the God. It's like God is in you, which is a very different thing to say there. You are a God within you, right? It's like a different, semantically different, though it's pointing at the same thing, but it gives it a different flavor. So I can definitely, yeah, you're like, I agree that there's like a disassociation there in the English language. We don't get to go right to the authority of, hey, you can create your own world. It's like, no, we need this like third party intermediary between us and our manifested destiny, whether it's Christ or God or the preacher or something like that, or the language in general. Just one thing, just before for Devin though, what's really interesting, and if Layla was here, she would jump all over this, is that there's this thing called New Thought that was developed in it starts off in the 1700s with hypnosis, and it turns into this whole thing about casting away basically the Catholic version of Christianity and talking about more the personal connection with Christ and God and everything like that. And you can actually trace a direct line from New Thought to Steve Hardison. It's crazy. But most people don't know about it. Like, Nick didn't know about it. But Steve Hardison is essentially a New Thought Christian. And most of America is developed on New Thought. Like all the turn of the century books from last, like Positive Thinking and like Think and Grow Rich, all of those books are based off Christian New Thought. So which is all about personal creativity. So it's kind of there's like a it's there, but it's not a spoken about vein of thinking. But it's something that, and I wonder if Rich Litvin knows about New Thought. One thing I wanted to point out in this too is, and I wonder, just to kind of like take it maybe a layer deeper, but Richmond talks about how through his one advantage of me spending so much of my own life feeling powerless is that I now quickly see how powerful people are. So I think that is like it's such a great quote in the sense of connecting. Like, I think you're asking, Michael, do you kind of turn people on to their own creativity, and how do you go about that? And like maybe one of the very first ways is to acknowledge that they feel powerless, and to acknowledge that you have felt powerless, and that is like that's a flavor of thinking. It's not the only way of thinking, but it is a very common way of thinking, and that there's actually a power in knowing that you felt powerless, so that you can see that. Because I find, at least with my own clients, and this actually is across the board, not just my own clients, but it's very easy to slip into powerless thinking and think that the world is fixed and that you're governed by the outer world. Like, oh, those people would never change their mind, or I need to act in a certain way around those people, or like my husband would never agree with me about that. There's like an assumed fixedness. And And like to be able to say something like, as a possibility, you know, would they agree with you? Like as a possibility this time, could they be in a different mood and agree with you? You know? So there's like a, yeah, like what Tatiana's saying, there is a beauty in being able to admit you were vulnerable, but that you're in control of that vulnerability. Yeah, that's like, you know, that's super creative power. So I think that that is being able to key in on people's powerlessness rather than say doing like the full positive thinking and just be like, oh no, don't worry about it, just think positive, or you're the creative god of your reality. Like all these things can easily turn into someone who feels powerless being like, I'm not that though, I'm not that person, I could never be that person, or will.
You've just pointed in that direction. And actually, you've presented something, put this forward in a way I hadn't thought about. It's like, well, acknowledge the powerlessness first. What I know doesn't work is if you go for the almost, and then it falls out of coaching and more into like teaching disguised as coaching. If you're trying to teach someone like, no, you are powerful. Well, what can be created there is your client is probably going to just start getting really frustrated. You continue to focus and point at this thing that they can't see. It could even go as far as they double down in their how certain they think they are that they are not powerful. People will go to great lengths to defend their beliefs, defend what they know, and hold on to it tight. So I love what you're saying, Neil. It's like acknowledge that that is their map of reality or flavor of thinking, as you put. I've not heard that. I like that. Yeah.
I get that. It's like and then if you can kind of in some way be like, so you're really creating yourself as being powerless, eh? That's a pretty powerful creation. And then it's got you really stuck. You know, then they might have a laugh about it. And I find sometimes that can be the best aha moment when people are like, oh fuck, you're right. I am creating this, eh? Yeah, totally. Like Hadiana's saying, can be a denial of the reality, which is just another hurt. Like, oh, stiff upper lip, you're just push through. Like, you know, it's gonna get better. That's not always I find at least. It depends on the situation. Sometimes people just need to push too. So that's pretty cool. I'm gonna go on to this number 11 because I think that's pretty cool. Kind of what we're. Anyone have any final word on that? Okay, cool. This is almost taps into what Devin was saying earlier. This isn't about you. Tap into something deeper. Your purpose, a higher calling, the universe, God. You cannot be a powerful coach if you think this is all about you. I have something that that's just been really recent for me in this way. This come from Spirit thing, which is very interesting. I was reading I've been rereading The Ultimate Coach, and I'm reading the first 2 pages like it says to do every time. And it says, who are you being in your community? And that, for whatever reason, that day just really struck me. I was like, who am I being in my community? And then, so I started writing about it. Like every night I do like a little journal. So I'm writing about this. And then I realized in my writing that I'm just writing about myself. And I was like, oh, fuck, I need help. Like, oh no, I'm blind here. So the last time I had a conversation with Nick, like one of my coaching conversations was all about community and we talked about community, which in my opinion is kind of like, in my opinion, it's impossible to have a higher purpose or a higher calling or to understand the universe or God or any of that kind of stuff if you're not thinking about community, because those things are all community. You know, they're not you necessarily. They're you, but it's you connected to something else. So we had a really deep conversation about that, and I think that it actually really helped me because it made me realize how judgmental I am of my communities, and that I am being judgmental of my communities. And that made me think a lot about what I am attempting to do and be as a member of my community. I don't have an answer necessarily yet, but it was a rhetorical question that really helped me in terms of that concept of coming from spirit. So that's what I have to say about that. Well,
Yeah, that's a really powerful one. What's just been what I just read, and it ties in beautifully with what I'm noticing in coaching. And the more I'm coaching, I'm able to see it's like, you know, some calls amazing, some in terms of me, in terms of who and what I'm being in the call, and other times that didn't quite, I didn't feel like in this thing. What looks to me like the golden thing in terms of ties in with what we were saying earlier, going in empty and sitting for a few minutes before a call and just emptying out. I don't want my clients to be talking to Will. They're talking to the intelligence of life. They're on the receiving end of an open channel, and I'm not there. They're not. Yeah, something about the package of Will and everything might feel nice in a conversation, etc. Cool, like I get that. People by people, etc. But when it comes to the coaching, the less I'm in that, the better in terms of my opinions, my beliefs, what I think should and shouldn't be. It's like they don't care about that at all. Help them hear themselves, and that when I read like come from spirit, it's like that formless thing, and let that formless intelligence flow through. Keep the channel open. And I like that, like my conversation with Nick today, he reminded me, it's like they're not paying you to be their friend. And there's something I've linked that to it. It's like that friend thing. It's still that Will story. There's still a bit of that, oh, I want to be liked. I hope they like, you know, and it's letting go of all of that. It's like that can't be in this space. Not to really serve. So that's what came up for me.
I like that too, because the spirit is kind of like objective in the sense of the spirit is going to enliven and push through any blockage because it's seeking life, you know, it's seeking to manifest. It's not seeking to fit into the current manifestation. That's awesome. That's fantastic. Was there any other kind of aspects of this book that anyone wanted to dive into, or should we go kind of just keep moving from there? Because I think that's about where we were last time. So we could just keep moving through the next couple disciplines here. Are they called disciplines? Components. Let's do it. Let's just keep pushing on. So the next one, and this is, I love this one. Well, I love them all, but. So get clear on where you are, and this speaks to what Will was just saying. Get clear on where you are speaking from and where you are speaking to. Speaking from your head to their head is only one way to coach. Try speaking from your heart to their inner wisdom, or from your gut intuition to their heart. For myself, I find that like speaking from head to head just turns into like, it sucks. It's like you're just like into technical analysis, and then you get into the details, and then suddenly you're in the weeds, and like it's like when you statistically look at life, it should not work. Like It's like somehow all of life itself, when you break it down on a logical level, just it's like you could just throw it in the trash, you know what I mean? But it's like you have to be able to pull back from the statistical level and see the holistic approach for myself at least, and kind of recognize that life is so much about overcoming what appears to be impossible, which is not impossible. It's just the numbers. It's just how you're kind of looking at the numbers. When I was in the film industry, we had to do that all the time. The director would be like, "We want this over there," and we'd be like, "That's not possible." And they'd be like, "Well, it's your job to make it possible," and then they just walk away. You're paid to make it work, and then they walk away, and then we'd make it work. But I'd love to hear what you guys think of when he says, like, when you're coaching or when you're speaking to people, where would you think that you're typically speaking from? Yeah, Will, and then Michael.
This was another awesome thing that is super fresh, and I'm playing with it. I I spoke to Nick recently about there's one particular client reached a point where kind of felt a bit stuck, and I think there was a lot of head-to-head stuff going on, and it got a bit entangled and a bit. I kind of felt a bit entangled in their story as well. So it's like, need to get some clarity. What is this stuckness? What's creating that? And Nick asked, "Where's your energy? Where's your energy in the call?" It's like, "Oh, okay." And it was this revealing of this whole dimension that I hadn't seen yet. Where it's like, okay, we focus a lot listening, questions. Those are huge topics of conversation and focus for coaches. And then this whole dimension's opened up. It's like, okay, there's the questions, and then there's the energy behind all of it. What is the energy you're creating on the call? What's the come from? I was like, oh man, I'm bringing in all sorts into the call. I'm bringing in my own frustrations and a bit of it, and all this. Started to work through this, and that stuckness just sort of faded away. We're back into a flow and a heart to heart, just a completely different thing. And that was down to not clever questions. It was totally down to the feel in the call. So that's what comes up for me, that bit about the come from. Where are you coming from?
Can you speak to, just before we go to Michael, just as a question? So it's like, get clear on where you're speaking from and where you are speaking to. So where, just from what you said there, Will, where do you think that you're speaking to when you're speaking to a client, or when you're just speaking in general to other human beings?
That's even fresher than the other thing. I've only just now I've come across that. It's kind of, okay, right. I'm observing where I'm coming from, where I'm speaking to. That's brand new. The first thing that comes up for me, I'm directly quoting Nick here. Again, another thing I'm playing with. He is speaking to the person's potential, and he's doing that at the same time as calibrating where they are, acknowledging where they are, not invalidating it, and at the same time speaking to them, speaking to the person they are becoming. So there's an amazing ability to both, it's a both and, to both acknowledge where someone's at and see and communicate with them, to them as the person they're becoming.
I love that. Would you kind of say that he's able to kind of like show them the gap maybe between where they are and where they're headed, but not in a way that makes the gap seem impossible to kind of surmount? Is that kind of along the lines of what you're saying, or?
That's a really interesting, that's a really good question. One I might have to think about more. In my experience working with Nick, or say Bloom, the coaches, somehow, this is how I'd have to think about it. I don't know how they do it, but they're able to not make it feel impossible. And maybe that's because they keep it out of the head territory. In fact, you spoke to it at the beginning. You're like, well, statistically, when you look at life, it's like this shouldn't work. If you're coming at it from hard data and all, that's all the head stuff. It's like, well, okay, if we enter that territory, yeah, some stuff can look pretty insurmountable, if not impossible. But something happens. It's a totally different thing when you're speaking heart to heart. The energy's there, the questions are there, the acknowledgement of where you're at, and talking to you, viewing all the potential you have. Something in that combination just makes it feel possible.
I love that. And thanks for being so present and creating right there. That is awesome. Well, I love that you like acknowledge, you're like, wow, this is coming to me right in the moment, and then you just went for it. It's fantastic. Michael.
I mean, I think this is the first time that I've thought about where am I speaking from and where am I speaking to. So this is a new concept for me. And I know traditionally I come from the head. I work in tech. I've been brought up in that. That's part of my traditional history, the way that I tell it. But the reality is, depending on the setting, certainly speaking from the heart or speaking from the gut instinct or the intuition or the inner wisdom is also equally, if not more so, available to me. I see that maybe it's just there's maybe a default or maybe a habitual way of thinking and going to that instead of staying rooted in the heart and staying rooted in the intuition. This was a good reminder for me.
I love that, Michael. And I also wonder, like for myself, when I was younger, tech was such a big thing for me. And the first thing that pops into my mind when you say that, because it sounds like you're making a distinction between kind of like the intellectual world and tech, and that being kind of a mental field. And I just wonder but you seem like a heartfelt guy, and like you're saying, you have access to that. So is there a place where heart and gut come into play in the tech world?
Oh, absolutely. They don't, I think the problem is most people, I mean, at least a lot of tech people that I knew when I lived in San Francisco, maybe they don't explicitly acknowledge that the tech industry could and should, in a way, I think, be more heartfelt, heart-centered, intuitive, guiding wisdom. I think in the brainstorming sessions that I do as a tech worker over the years, I think people do access that inner wisdom and that guiding light from the universe. But as an industry, I think there's a lot of room, and that's part of why I stay in it, is because I want to help it become more heart-oriented, more human-oriented, when it's so easy to just stay in the technological space.
I kind of think in that data compiling kind
Yeah.
of world. I
We
love
need
how
it more than ever to be more of the rest.
yeah, absolutely. Considering like AI and all this kind of stuff, and like
Yeah.
I really like how you spoke to, like at first you started off with the kind of coulds and shoulds, but then you went right into pointing out places where it does actually happen. So that's awesome. Sounds like you have powerful insights about where it's already manifesting, which is beautiful to key in on. That's awesome, man. Just from that kind of, just as a question for my own curiosity, in the tech world, and then those conferences where you are noticing those things that are happening, those growth, like those heart-based or gut-based instincts, How would you define the from and to in that kind of situation? I'd love to, because it sounds like you're coaching in that kind of environment. So,
Well, I do sales and marketing in the tech space, but I also do sales and marketing consulting on the side for tech companies. And I mean, again, I think I think it's easy to be in the default thoughtful place, the head space. Um, but it's also accessible, and if there's intention to put it into the heart space, I think that could equally be done. I'd have to explore that and play with that a little bit more in the real world to now that I have this framework of thinking, who am I speaking from and to? I think I can go, I'll have more to report next time.
that's awesome. That's very cool. And I also love that you're this gives me a chance too to talk about the whole kind of prosperous person formula. Like I find that I like how you said that, you're working in like sales and consulting. Um, but we kind of talked here a lot about how this book is to me the catalyst for a larger thing, which is the prosperous person formula, where you can use these concepts in things like sales and marketing or your personal relationships. So it's very cool to see you literally setting that intention.
That's how Devin got me to read the book. He said, prosperous person. And I said, that sounds great.
Yeah, Devin. That's killer, man. Devin, speaking of which,
Oh, I love these conversations. I know I say it every time. It's great to see you guys. Uh, I have a few different things. I'm just kind of prioritizing. The first being when Will said, first of all, thank you, Will, for being here. It's I love every call that you are a part of, and I look forward to having a one-on-one with you. You said it in passing, but you were basically like, essentially, our role is to be having a heart to heart. And in that moment, I just had this light bulb moment of like, duh, it's kind of hard to have a heart to heart when I'm not connected to my heart. And maybe that's really obvious to others, but that was an insight to me. And that first idea, when my friend Tay said she likes to empty, she's a somatic coach, and she said she always likes to empty herself out before her calls. And I just kind of like looked at her sideways and I was like, what do you mean by that? And this was maybe 2 years ago. And I realized that partially why this book made such a large impact on me is before calls, before I actually practiced emptying myself out and like getting here, I remember doing the craziest things, or like from my perspective now, it would have been crazy. Like I was like reading notes. I was like cramming notes before a coaching session. I was like reading over questions. I was like, um, if it were an enrollment call, I was looking over like enrollment scripts. And when I was there, nothing worked. And it was so frustrating that I did it more. But yeah, it's hard to have a heart to heart if I'm not connected to my heart. And I'll leave off on this other one little share. Not lost on me that I've been eyeing this book, another Steve Chandler, for a few years now, and I just found it in person like 2 days ago here in Bellingham. And then when we hopped on this call, Michael kind of pointed out these two disciplines that were the small G and you know and then Will kind of like insightfully pointed out that we are pointing people back to their power, and how can we do that? And there's been one page that I've highlighted so far, which is pretty rare for me. Usually I'm like always writing and highlighting, and I'll just share it with you. So it's about Steve Hardison, and it's almost coming from this like it's coming from Steve Chandler being like, like Hardison always does this thing. And like he just always goes there, and it works, but it's like almost sometimes frustrating. Like I want to be stuck in the problem. Like I want to figure it out. And the questions were, I'll just read you the little section here. Here, I'll just read you 2 paragraphs. It gives me greater understanding of why my friend and life coach Steve Hardison used to ask me 2 questions over and over in the course of our work together. When I described a problematic situation in my life, he would listen carefully and then say, quote, quote, write her down. Okay, given that that's the situation, what would you like to create? Notice that it was not, how do you want to solve it? As if the problem itself had all the power, as if the problem were a bomb we had to carefully disarm. He never saw a problem as having the power in the situation. He always saw creativity as having all the power.
That's so fun. That's amazing. When we have such a problem obsessed world, hey?
The other big trip of this call was that you brought up New Thought.
Mm.
New Thought movement, and I'm curious to hear how you like trace that through to Steve Hardison. But in packing to come on this tour, I was kind of torn up to go. Yes, and definitely, Tatiana, I want to hear from you next. I was like, oh, which books do I bring? Which do I not? And I ended up bringing this little book that I was given after I did a video, my first video podcast. And it's called The Golden Key by Emmett Fox. And it's literally from the New Thought movement.
Yeah, and if you ever have a one-on-one call with with Layla, or if she's in here, Layla is like a digger. Like, as soon as she catches a hold of something, she'll just dig and dig and dig till she finds the root of it. And she also, it's not that she's conspiracy theory minded, she's very much like looks for the back end of everything. She's not looking to like, she doesn't care about the lure being dangled in front of you. She's like, okay, who's the fisherman? And who taught the fisherman? And who taught that fisherman? And like, how far back does it go? You know, where's the root of this thinking? Where did it emerge? She's so good at that, you know. She's a journalist, but it's like what she went to university for, investigative journalism. So it's like a hobby of hers. It's to just like dig and dig and dig. But yeah, that's a big part of it. And she does trace it all the way to Steve Hardison, to the point where the church that he's part of, so much of the American churches are founded on New Thought. So it's actually crazy when you really break into it. And Tatiana, I'll definitely get to in just a second here, is like, when you actually look into the church, this is my feeling about it. And it's interesting that we in nowadays think a lot about Eastern religions as a way that we, like when we think about spirit, we think about Eastern religions. But when you actually look at sales, it's all Christian based. And that enrollment is really, in another word, just another word for missioning. And if you like get deep into how missioning works in the church, which is if you read Steve Hardison's books, where he got his sales tactics together was by going door to door to a point where he was able to baptize like 400 people, you know what I mean? So he was like selling for God, talk about like letting the spirit in and all that kind of stuff. He was like moving people to the point of religious baptism. Like, so enrollment, missioning, spirit, community, those are all aspects of the church, whereas a lot of other religions are somewhat solely singular. There's community, but there'll be like silence in the communities, or there'll be like individual gurus and all those kinds of things. So the concept of spirit and community, they all kind of connect together. So the more you kind of understand New Thought, modern Christianity, American sales techniques, enrollment, missioning, like actually the literal power of the church in sales in America, you'll start to see that a lot of really powerful salespeople in America are Christians. Why are they Christians? Because they have a community. What do they do in their community? Missioning. What is missioning? Enrollment. And it's all service based and all that kind of stuff. So it's very interesting once you dig into it, but look at it as like an apparatus, like as a system for governance and economy, because America is a Christian country, like, in its roots or whatever. So it's a very so if you kind of like distill the religiosity out of it, especially the Catholic religion out of it, and just kind of like, that's not what's actually happening in America. America's more Protestant and New Thought. Then you see this, you start to see sales and enrollment and community and spirit and all that kind of stuff from a new angle. And also from this idea of like, there's no problem too big for God to surmount, Cheers, Michael. How it going, man? Thanks. After that, Tatiana, I'd love to hear what you have to say. Thank you for being so patient.
Hello. I kind of have a cold right now, so that's why I'm kind of not on video and talking too much. But I really wanted to talk on this point because this was one of the points that I've been just personally experienced a lot recently, and I've just been seeing kind of a big transition happening of how, yeah, kind of touching on what Devin said, our world, we really enter into this kind of analytical from the head space. There's always these systems, there's always these steps to just solve every problem. Everything's just a problem that needs to be solved. And while that approach can be super effective for certain, very surface level problems, or just, how to tackle something in a systematized way that's easier than just like intuitively, it's now being counteracted with the fact that we've neglected the heart space so much. We're seeing now the really severe negative side effects with just our whole world of only coming from the head, only coming from that analytical space to tackle every problem, where now we're seeing the value of coming from the heart, speaking to other people's heart, and not just that something I think actually Ellen would touch on is the deep listening and listening from your heart, and how that is almost like a skill we have to relearn right now, is listening and speaking from that place, because we've been so conditioned to always be from our head, always just, this is just a problem that needs to be tackled. Oh, you got a pain, here's a pill. Oh, you got this little problem, here's a solution. There's always that immediate going to that, instead of acknowledging maybe there's something more deep down. And like, this is something just literally, again, recently in the last few days, I've had to be tackling with myself is I can think and I can plan and I can systematize my problem all I want, but if I'm not actually going inside to acknowledge, where is even this pain coming from? Where is this cycle, like the roots of it? Even if it might seem ridiculous, because maybe that's a part of this cycle, is that we've been telling ourselves this pain is ridiculous and ignoring it the whole time, because everyone around us tried to systematize it, tried to just make it this little problem and say, oh, it's not a problem, you can just be happy and it's gone. Oh, it's not this, you can just positive affect it away, right? And how coming from the heart, while it is about, bringing out the highest of ourselves, sometimes it is acknowledging these deep, deep pains and wounds that we tried to just problem away, that we tried to just brush under that rug with a system or just a logical kind of solution, instead of that heart solution, where who knows what that solution might be. Maybe it's just to be listened to and be heard, have that pain be acknowledged as a pain, no matter how ridiculous we may have made it out to be, or the world. And that so much could be maybe healed by just saying it's okay to feel bad, when we are so obsessed right now with not feeling bad. And I just like, there is acknowledgments now of toxic positivity, of how we can literally use positivity in a way to delude ourselves, to ignore the truth of what is happening. And I just feel like that is where the heart comes in. That is where that coming with unconditional true love of that person, of seeing them in their power, seeing them as this whole person, acknowledging both the light and the darkness that exists, because that is the whole of who we are. And when we can't acknowledge either side, when we're only in the head or we're only in the heart, we're not acknowledging the whole, which is what creates the holistic healing, and then the prosperity, that prosperous person that we're all going towards. So like this was just something that came to me in the sense the last few days I've been working through these kinds of things myself, of just releasing that need to solve a problem and just letting myself feel what I'm feeling and acknowledge that I was hurt in ways that was ignored. We've all been hurt in ways that we've maybe been ignored, and acknowledgement and acceptance in that way, not just bulldozing it over with positive affirmations, actually can facilitate healing and growth and those steps forward. And it's not a negative thing to acknowledge the darkness. It's not wrong to say something is wrong here. And, sometimes we get so caught up in the logic of it all that, yeah, we tend to ignore that little bit of hurt. And that little bit of hurt can eventually grow and grow. And suddenly we don't know why we're always hurting. So that was my little bit of a contribution. And just from my own little bit of, like I said, experience over the last few days, and this particular point really ringing home to me of how there is, like he says, there's coaching from the head that can work, but have you ever considered coaching from the heart, speaking to other areas, their spirit, their truth, or even their pain? And that kind of is what triggered me to actually stop trying to systematize myself and just ask myself, what is hurting me so badly? No matter how dumb or silly or whatever it was, what is it? And go back and back and back to that little child that got humiliated or got hurt in a way that never got acknowledged. And to be able to be seen in that way just allows so much possibilities to happen again. It releases that grip that memory might have had, that feeling might have had. And then we can go back to the head, and then we can go back to creating systems that we can create abundance and prosperity through. And finding that balance and finding that holistic approach is so utterly important right now. And I can just see so many people starting to transition in that way and acknowledge these things. And it's becoming more important in our world that we come from that space and not just from our logical head space.
Yeah, I absolutely agree, Teddy. And that's like like I like that you said that you just kind of coming to that in the last couple of days. Thank you for that, because it's there's so many levels to that, like that was what I was kind of saying earlier about community. For me is that I would look at communities through only maybe specific things we do, like what the actions that we were taking as a community or the philosophy that we have as a community, but looking at my communities in a very narrow way. Oh, here comes Kate for the last. Hello, Kate. And I'm not acknowledging like there was acknowledging people, not maybe as a whole, which it takes like a broad view, and then also acknowledging my communities as a whole, like my communities as full of people with varying like levels of skill maybe, or insight, or like whatever it is, it's dynamic. Kate, hi. I think
Hello there.
um maybe you didn't see, you guys have changed your time. So it's actually an hour earlier than normal for you, I think. It's what we're at 6. Did you know that? Or are you just jumping in for the last bit?
Oh,
Yeah,
yeah, I just clicked on the invite and it just
just
brought me in now.
oh,
So,
weird. That's so
oh,
weird.
so I should have been here at 6 p.m.
Yes, because your guys' time has changed.
Oh, so will they
Right?
always be at 6 p.m. now, or will they be at 7
Yes.
p.m.?
Yeah, they'll be at 6 till Canada shifts their time, which I think is sometime next month. I'm not
Oh,
sure exactly when.
sorry.
Oh, it's okay.
Sorry.
Oh, don't apologize. It's that weird wonky time of the year where, depending on where you are in the world, the time is shift. All the times are shifting.
Who invented that, really, you know? Do you want me to go? Because I feel like I've probably disturbed everything now. Or should I just be really
Absolutely
quiet?
not. No way do we want you to leave. Heck no, Kate.
I'll be
No.
really quiet and just listen in. I'm so
Uh,
mad and sad I missed it. And I've been on a call, so it's not like I've been waiting for it to start. So I've been on a call, so I couldn't have got any earlier. Anyway, sorry.
okay, well,
Carry on.
yeah, maybe just listen in. Devin has a quick response, I think, here to what Tatiana's saying. You want me to unmute you? If I can find it before you do. Oh, I don't know how to do it. Oh, yeah, you should be good to go.
All right, guys. First of all, Kate, you should definitely stay. Welcome. And I just wanted to, there was this one little memory, and it was so impactful that I wanted to share with this group, especially after what Tatiana just said. And it was this conversation that I was having with someone several years ago, and she was also trained as a somatic life coach. And I had never experienced anything like that. I was like, what is somatics? What is any of this? And we were having this conversation, and I recognize now that I was all up in my head and in the problem and problem solving. And her question, it was such a simple question, but it completely caught me off guard. And this is what I wanted to share. It caught me off guard, and it like broke my thinking in a beautiful way. And it was so useful. And she said, instead of trying to solve it with me, I tried to enroll her subconsciously into solving it. And she just said, can you be okay with that?
Yeah, it's so powerful. It's like 3 principles thinking, like I was in the same way. Kate, we're just kind of just to fill you in a little bit here. We were talking about how in this section of the book here, and I think it's good for us to just kind of say it again, is we're talking about this set of clear intention. Get clear on where you're speaking from and where you're speaking to. Speaking from your head to their head is only one way to coach. Try speaking from your heart to their inner wisdom, or from your gut intuition to their heart. And kind of the place that we've gotten into is kind of talking about how a lot of our world, because Devin was talking about a book he got, The Creator, from Steve Chandler, where Steve Hardison asks him, considering that what you've just said, when Steve Chandler is talking about a problem that he has, what would you like to create? And that kind of got us into a conversation about how our world is so obsessed with problem solving, and then, connecting systems to our problems to try and fix them. And then Tatiana and Devin were both kind of talking about how that really just creates a world of just problem solving. There's always just a problem to solve. And then it makes me think of the 3 principles. And when I started to think about what would it be like if I just stopped trying to solve my problems? Like, what if my problems actually solve themselves? Wouldn't that be crazy? And I started thinking like that, and my problems did start to solve themselves. Like, it was almost like if I waited long enough, the answer would arrive, kind of like in due course, you know, or the problem would just, you know, it would other people would actually unwind the problem, like through a natural set of occurrences, which I found to be that really helped me in life, because then I could devote more of my time to creating rather than analysis and procedural like systems. Will, and then Aiden.
Tatiana, that was amazing. That's hit me. I think someone already pointed to this. I think you, Neil. There are a lot of layers to what you shared. So I'll just reel them out. Carl Jung's shadow work came up for me when you were talking about a full acceptance of the broadest experience that humans are capable of having. I sometimes say I want to know how deeply I can love and how deeply I can hate. And when it comes to hate, know it's there and know that I can control it, that I am safe in that emotion when it comes up. And I suppose that this has really hit me. Like I'm quite emotional because this is one area where I see, like we talk about fear. Going into yourself seems to utterly terrify a lot of people. They do not want to go there. They don't want to know. And you see the language everywhere. Something I hear sort of from my sister's age and then that sort of demographic. Don't deep it. As in, don't. It's not that deep. Don't make it. And then I sort of hear, you know, one person will say it, and then, oh yeah, no, I guess it's not that deep, isn't it? They're all sort of, then they're enrolling each other in, like, ignore it. Don't. It's not deep. It doesn't even exist. It's not there. It's not there. Ignore it. And what you were saying about that, the fixing, it brought up this, like, the technological age that we live in, and I think a creation is a mirror of the creator. And then there can be this weird reversal where we begin to mirror the machines that we've created. More and more, I feel that we expect ourselves to function like a machine, to be infallible, to never break down, to be able to work every hour, to not have a human experience. And so it's really easy when you go to the doctor, well, here's some medication. Say, okay, cool. And that's going to sort it quickly. Yeah, cool. Quick, get it done, sort it, done, on to the next. And you hear the language that I hear people use, you know, friends that might go, they might be starting therapy. And this isn't me saying that making any judgment on the therapeutic process versus any other growth process. Whatever works, but they go in with, I might ask them, it's like, oh, you've well done, you want to start the path, that's huge. Like, you know, what are you hoping to get out of it? Coping strategies. And it's that surface level, like, still stuck in that, I need to cope better. I need to just get by so I can continue to function like a machine. Quick little top-ups rather than a really... And I think it's innocent. I think people don't... And I didn't. This is really recent. I look back to last year and things that I was doing, situations I was putting myself in. It's like, that was all symptomatic of a human that was coping with their life. Until at some point in this apprenticeship with Nick, I realised that you're allowed to more than cope. It isn't this thing to fix or cope with. a hell of a lot more is available than coping. But I think that's a massive blind spot for a lot of people, this guy as well. And so we end up stuck in this, well, look, if I can just cope and get by, that's good enough. Medication, coping strategies, etc. What have you written here? What do you call the opposite or the deeper alternative to coping strategies? Connection to truth. That's what's come up for me. Maybe it's in that word connection as well. You pointed to it earlier, in fact, Evan, that connection to your own heart. And then connection to yourself becomes connection to others, genuine, deep connection to others when you go inward first. Whereas coping, I can't speak for everyone and it's not my place to, but I certainly know when I have been heavily coping with life, my connections weren't deep to myself or to others. And I certainly had a lot more superficial relationships based on drinking, taking drugs and getting messy all the time. So that, yeah, connection to truth would be what I'd say.
That's brilliant. Brilliant. Well, thank you. I'm just gonna move on because I feel like Aiden has been waiting patiently and we could unpack that so deeply. So just gonna let that resonate for a bit and see what Aiden has to say. Oh, I don't think I can. I'm gonna unmute you.
Sorry,
There
I couldn't unmute myself. Something that Tatiana said about the child, acknowledging the child within the wounded child. I was speaking with my girlfriend last night about the effects of our upbringing and sort of neediness for love, and because parental figures were not consistently stable. And I think that this acknowledgement of like what Tatiana was saying, it's funny because I haven't really run into toxic positivity because I'm not really swimming in these circles of like really, really kind of hippie ideals these days. I'm actually in quite the opposite. People are just not really on that level. And so it's quite funny to even think that toxic positivity would be an issue. Whereas I think just the acknowledgement of those deeper hurts that and acceptance of them, I think the whole discussion about problem solving is really on point, and I really resonate with that quite a lot, because I had a therapist ask me this once a couple of years ago, which was like, sounds like you're trying to solve all these problems, like, and I think she asked, like, what if you just stop trying to solve these problems, very similar to what Devin said, just let it be. So I'm not quite sure where I had as this discussion just kept going, I was like, the threads of interconnection were really there for me, and I'm trying to find it. I think what I acknowledged last night in the conversation with my girlfriend is that I am very much in my head, and as a musician and particularly a songwriter and someone who like prided himself for a long time on being emotionally attuned and able to like convey through lyrics and voice and song a depth. Like it felt like for me, a purpose for me was to like kind of break people's hearts open to get them connected to their heart. Like that was literally, like, I've written it so many times, like my mission statement is to keep people connected to their hearts. And it almost felt like a justification for like, why are you a musician? Why are you a songwriter? Like, why is making art like a valuable thing in the world today? And it just felt like, okay, I really need to identify that. And I forget about it frequently, but like that still resonates with me. And then I recognize that like I'm not as connected to my heart as I would like to be. You know, as the seasons change, there's these certain resonances that I just remember looking out the window while the light was changing and the leaves were falling, and just feeling just kind of these emotional layers of like the season and kind of the flow of life. And I just need to do that more for myself. And if I could bring that into like a client relationship of that like kind of observational, like I've done a few Vipassana retreats, and just like sitting there while your nose is so itchy or your knees or your back is hurting, and just not having this reaction to like I need to fix it. I think they're all just so interconnected, and I think I need to do it more for myself to have that sense of grace and slowing down, um, in order to really hold that space for other people. So I think that, you know, head to head versus heart to heart. Um, and I think I'm always looking for people to connect with on that level. I think that's probably my greatest like misery, is that I'm not often able to sit and have the depth of connection and conversation that I want to have with people on that level. And it seems like it's really a role to step into even more so for me. Is that, you know, that heart centric kind of awareness. And I think what I'm, you know, talking about sales tactics and um, coping strategies or whatever, you know, like I think if I'm going into sales, I really want it to just be like the technique of how do I ask a question that gets people immediately connected to their heart? Like, how does that feel? Or like, what does that mean to you? Or some, you know, just remember that like my script just purely being things like that. And that's what's becoming very clear in these conversations about this book is, is getting really curious. And I brought that into the conversation with my girlfriend last night of just like, yeah, like what makes us have these habitual patterns that we're struggling with, you know, in our relationship dynamic, not having enough, not needing more of that comfort and love, like getting really curious about like why do you feel that way, like what is, and even that exercise of imagining yourself as a child and like holding yourself as a child and comforting yourself as a child, it's just so like it's like I'd like to hold space for people to do that. And I've never done it before. You know, I've gotten up on a stage and I've wailed, I've sang in a way that someone comes up to me and they're like, "Fuck you, that's exactly what I've been feeling." Like you just pulled that out of me, you know, like I've been having that exact same. That was my story. You just like enacted it. Ouch. And I'm just like, sorry. Like yeah, that's we're all feeling similar things like that. So um yeah, I just stepping into the power that I have to help people feel, you know, is just it's just so crucial. And I need more of that awareness to come back to me, you know, to tap into it for my own well-being, as well as, you know, sharing it with others. Just yeah, it's been kind of a long time coming, and I think I fall in and out of it, but I'm ready to come back to it again, you know. And it's just interesting because yesterday I posted on my Instagram story, I reshared a series of you mentioned Jung just there, and it was a series of some of the best quotes I've ever seen from Jung, and the shadow came up in it, and I just wanted to read a couple of these quotes. Um, Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. People will do anything, no matter how absurd, in order to avoid facing their own souls. One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. I don't aspire to be a good man. I aspire to be a whole man. So I'll leave it at that. But yeah, the shadow self and the heart connection are just so potent, and we need more of that.
I love that, Aiden. Yeah, permission to lead, like you're saying, Devin. I think that's so awesome. There's so many great things there. Just to clarify, from my own curiosity, speaking of curiosity, what it sounds to me like you're standing like at a threshold. Is that kind of is that something like you feel?
Yeah, definitely, because I've been kind of developing the business of going from being a music teacher to being more of a music coach. And that distinction has been really kind of tenuous for me for a while. And now that I'm experiencing coaching, yeah, I don't know how long I've been at the threshold, but I really I keep there's that little hesitation of like, okay, when I'm gonna step over, when am I really gonna be in it? So yeah, definitely a threshold.
I have another maybe more meta question because I find this really curious and you're speaking to so many things. The reason why I asked is to create some context around it is that you're saying a lot of things that to me are like right at the beginning of the prosperous person formula. Like you're enacting it, you're standing there enacting the formula. Which is so beautiful considering that you just dropped into this call like 2 calls in. So, so a question would just if we kind of thought of the fact that you're kind of making the distinction between teaching and coaching as a thing that exists within your thinking, within the fact that you're crossing that threshold, how does it feel to be on that threshold? Like, what's one of the main feelings that you have about that threshold? And I ask this kind of from my own curiosity because I think it's just a beautiful place that you're in.
Well, I mean, there's certainly fear and temerity and uncertainty, and I think I also recognize that like in my teaching, I've potentially already been coaching. I've actually already been doing things that have been more like guiding people to their own discoveries. So the God with a small g, kind of like recognizing that I've already been doing it or I've already had that power is maybe part of it. But I don't know, there's maybe just some mental patterns of stuckness, head stuff that's getting in the way a little bit. So just talking there felt really good, and it's like obviously when you're coaching you don't want to be giving them a sermon necessarily, but like how can I convey that more?
It sounds like just I just wanted to point at something which I think again is really cool is that you briefly talked about some of the fears, but then you went right into what you're certain about. And I think that that's really cool.
I'm getting more certain about it, especially talking
That's
in a group like this.
fantastic. That's what this whole thing is about. So I'm really, really nice to see that occurring for you, man. That's very, very cool.
And just incredibly ironically, as Will mentioning like drinking culture and stuff, I've like got this potential client fellow who just keeps wanting to be a fucking friend with me and go out drinking, and he texted me while we were on this call, "Hey man, meet me at the George," and I'm just like, no. and I just decided like, okay, maybe Devin would suggest this. Just tell him that you're in a coaching call. So I did. I said,
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm on a coaching call and I'm doing dinner after.
Yeah, totally. Absolutely. That's perfect. Lead exactly like that. And I love what Katie's saying here too. What if there was no threshold to cross? I love that. Okay, as a possibility, what if there is no threshold to cross? That's a possibility. And I don't want to press on it too much because we're not here to jump all over you. But Devin, go for it.
I'm so glad you're here, and that is exactly what I would have encourage you to do. Like, hey, I'm actually on a coaching call right now. This is how my world operates. Invite them into that. I'm not at the pub right now. I do this professionally, you know. So I love that you already took an action on them. In everything that you shared, there was one thing that popped out, which was like this desire of something that was not there, a depth that you're craving, that you would like to meet people at. And I viscerally get that. And I don't think you're the only one. I don't think we are the only ones either. And it reminded me of this line that stayed with me from A Course in Miracles, which is essentially like only that which, oh, hold on. Well, like if we perceive that a situation is lacking something, it is only because we are not giving it. We're not giving that thing. So if it's depth, it's like I actually am realizing that there's another layer of depth that I want to bring that I'm holding back from. And I think that it takes an incredible amount of courage, especially in situations where maybe it's more superficial or people are like gathering around drinks and kind of not talking about the stuff. But it can be on us to lead and be like, and now we're talking about God and now the nature of reality and our shadows. And you guys want to study some Young quotes? Like, how is that popping up for you? You know, it's if we want that depth, it's our responsibility to bring it in.
Yeah, I find that to be like that's consistently, I so agree with you, Devin. That's consistently in my life too. Is like if I am seeing that something is not there, it is my job to make it there. And that's just like that's almost the end all be all of it, you know, rather than waiting for something to come along. Or like, this is not the right situation for this. It's like, well, I'm just gonna expand every situation to be this way if that's what I'm feeling needs to be occurring in this situation. Go for it, man. Yeah.
I have one last little quick thing, and this is not a response to necessarily the other shares, but it's something that I'm experiencing. It's like a lived experience of these things and these conversations, and I just want to first of all say thank you, because these conversations and this kind of work has given me a foundation to rest on. And I just want to bring you into a snapshot of my life. Like, basically, my good friend and drummer in this tour, we stepped away for a walk, and he was like, "Dude, I'm learning so much about just like how you're able to like communicate with people in high stress situations and such." And like we're working with we have a more holistic musician crew, and then we have like a Florida bro crew and like tech millionaires, and it's an interesting little dance of egos and situations. And he said this, and he was like, "How are you able to do this?" And the first thing that popped out was it surprised me, and I wrote it down, but it was like, I realized I have to let go of expectations. I have to let go of judgment, and I have to let go of competition. And if I let go of those three things, I'm able to just create. And even in like this stressful sound check, the leader of the everything came over to me and was like, "We got all these problems with this thing." And I was like, "Whoa, hey, this is the priority for right now. We're good. Like, this is how we're gonna manage it." And immediately, like me just dropping into, we're okay. It allowed everyone to kind of come back into that place rather than trying to fight the mind to mind, problem to problem, solution solving. So this is like super practical stuff, and I just can't thank you guys enough for like keeping it alive with these conversations. Thank you, Neil, and for everyone else that's coming.
Yeah, thank you for extracting that value, Devin, because it's like, and thank you for being here and being so consistent. Thank you, Kate, too, for being so consistent. Tatiana, I love that you come in so strong. Aiden, I'm loving that you're bringing so much into the conversation, so much of yourself, you know. Will, thank you so much for joining us, and I hope you brought so much to the conversation, and I hope that this gives you a framework to either work off yourself or work against, like for your own book club concepts. And this situation makes me like I had an insight about the prosperous person formula, and then through these 30 odd conversations, it's just fleshed out and fleshed out and fleshed out, and then it's seen it working in people's lives to the point now where I'm like clear. I'm like this will work. It does work. I've seen it work regardless of the type of person you are, the situation that you're in, which is what a formula ultimately is supposed to do, is to be something that you can, you create within, use as a vehicle for literally for this one, for prosperity in your lives. So like you said, Devin, as a foundational tool, which I think is so important to be able to be like, especially with these calls, but these concepts, is that you have something to rest on. And be like, it's okay, the situation that is unfolding in front of me, because I have these other connections, I have this community, I have this concept, philosophy, value system, which shores me up in these situations and makes me calm and be able to, like you say, shift that situation and create in it in a way that brings about prosperity for everyone, which is ultimately the idea, right? Is like, if I personally, and through by proxy, the people who are involved in the situation want to see this kind of idea go viral, it has to be in such a way that it shifts things for people and for the people that they're connected to. So thank you for like living these processes out as like evidence, hard evidence that it works. So thank you very much. It's becoming more than, it's what the Hummingbird Society is all about, right? Transmuting the impossible into the possible. It's fucking happening. So thank you so much for bringing your energy and your spirit and your intentions, yeah, and your God with a little G into this space. It's like Mount Olympia in here. Okay, you guys have a great week, and I'll see you next week.